Jesus Christ according to Mark. As Jesus taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. There is an ELCA pastor whose name is Katie Hines Shaw. She's part of an ELCA clergy group on Facebook that I look at. And she was kind enough to share her thoughts on this passage this week. So much of what I will share with you today, I need to give credit to her for that. Preachers were really trying to take care of each other this week, knowing that today might be difficult. So I looked to somebody else. First, will you pray with me? Holy and loving God, may my words, our words, be your words. And may the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight. O Lord, you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Widows come up a lot in the Bible. They are in the Pentateuch and the Psalms, in the historic books and the books of the prophets, in the Gospels and in Acts, in the epistles. Even Revelation mentions widows. Often widows are coupled with orphans in these texts because these people were the people who were the lowest of the low. They occupied the same place in the ancient social sphere. They are the poorest of the poor, and in a patriarchal society without a man to protect or provide for them, widows were reliant on the social safety nets of their age. Social safety nets like gifts from extended family or charity that was provided from their religious community. In fact, laws written into the Torah about religious communities taking care of these widows and orphans. So while some families and some religious communities were undoubtedly generous, in many cases, then, as happens now, people fall through the cracks. A widow might find herself homeless or destitute, forced to beg to make her way. It wasn't a good or easy life. It could often be a lonely life. This is especially galling because in many cases, widows did so much to care for their families, their societies, and their religious communities. Widows in the Bible take care of children and other family members. They make clothing for the poor. They see to the upkeep of the temple. The world hasn't changed much, has it? I think about all those who are the underappreciated and underpaid backbones of society. Immigrants, yes, immigrants and migrants who work in farms and factories, women who care for family while running the PTO and making quilts for the church giveaway, social workers, teachers, librarians, and first responders, those who are not paid a lot to do work with the most at-risk people. On this Veterans Day weekend, we think of those who in the military, some who gave their lives in service for our country. These people, like the widows, are indispensable, and yet they are not well rewarded. Even worse, they are always asked to do more. Could you just give a little more? Could you just stay and do this a little longer? It's galling and is the setup for our readings today. The widow at Zarephath that you heard in the first reading is caring for a son, but she has still fallen through the social safety net. He is young. He is not old enough to take care of her yet. So there should be someone in the community, usually the brother of her husband, who is supposed to be taking care of her, but apparently that is not happening. There is a famine in the land, and no one has given her anything. So she is gathering sticks. She is preparing one last meal for she and her young son. When our story opens, the Lord has sent the prophet Elijah to command that she feed him too. Can you imagine? In the gospel reading, Jesus and the disciples are in the temple. And many people are coming to the treasury to give their offerings. Some of them undoubtedly are scribes in long robes, donating large sums of money. Yet Jesus calls attention to an unlikely one. Jesus calls the disciples' attention to a widow who is donating just 2 small coins and gives everything that she has. I hear in the widow's stories your stories. How you were young and the threat of conflict was real, but you heard a call to serve your country. You were already working full time and taking care of children, and your parents started to need your help too. Your co-workers rely on you to have all the answers rather than doing the research themselves to find what they need. The church taught you to believe one thing about LGBTQ plus people, but you love your gay grandchild. Groceries are expensive, but you know the food bank shelves are low. You bring sandwiches for parish porch lunches, but the pastor asks you to serve with room in the inn too. Being asked to do one more thing, it seems like too much. And yet, this widow steps up. And you do too. It seems without fail, in fact, you step up too. The widows in our readings follow God's calling. One takes the prophet home to share her oil and flour, even though it's only enough for one meal. Do you see what she is doing? She is willing to give her last meal to this prophet. She gives to the temple, even though it is only enough for one meal, she gives to this prophet. Now, whether she is a very giving woman who wants to give all that she has, or the system under which she lives has made her believe that she must feed this man before she feeds her child. I do not know. But the prophet shows up and she feeds him. The other gives to the temple all that she had to live on, even though it's only 2 coins, worth less than a penny. It seems like that little bit won't be enough. Now, whether she is a giver and she trusts that God is going to take care of her, or she feels pressured by those scribes in those long robes, by a system that holds her down and tells her if she does not drop those coins into that basket, then she will be punished by God. I don't know. What we do know is that she gives all that she has. In the wake of the world's need, it doesn't seem like we have enough to give. We feel stretched so thin, numerically, financially, resource-wise, heat and air. We feel stretched so thin. I think it is useful to acknowledge that we are not God. So when we feel stretched so thin, just let's stop for a moment and remember, we are not God. Thanks be to God. We are not God. Another Lutheran pastor you may have heard of, Nadia Bolz-Weber, compares being human to an overloaded fuse box. You simply can't run the hairdryer and the toaster at the same time. That's okay. She goes on to say that when the world is on fire, and don't we believe it feels on fire, and we only have 1 bucket of water, then it is important and maybe life-giving to focus on one priority. We can do this knowing that there are others with different callings. We can do this knowing that someone is being called to care for refugees. Someone is being called to care for needy school children. Someone is being called to care for our environment. Still another works to prevent gun violence. One supports unwed mothers, another those experiencing homelessness. We each have our passion, we each have our call, and it only works when we all share. Sometimes it's all we can do to care for ourselves and those closest to us, and that's okay too. Bolz-Weber says, almost anything will work again if you unplug it for 10 minutes. So if you need to unplug for a bit, that's okay. But always remember, there is something wonderful about serving others that fills us up in ways we might not anticipate or imagine. This is true in our readings, at least it can be. The widow of Zarephath may only have a little oil and a little meal, but somehow when she shares it with Elijah, it is enough. Not only is it enough, it is more than enough. When she shares it with Elijah, not just for one day does it go on, but it goes on for all of the days until the famine is over. You already know this. You know this is how this works. I have seen it. I've heard the stories. You heard the call to serve our country and learned how to lead. You taught a class, you led a board, and though you didn't get paid much to do it, it was the best job you ever had. You have a fixed income, but you give generously to your church and to our synod. It isn't exciting to give a predictable pledge, but it makes you feel good being part of something bigger than yourself. You don't feel the same way about a candidate as your friend does, but You went out of your way to hear their perspective. It felt like healing in our divided world. You work long hours, you have chores at home, but you took your kid over to help rake leaves at the sick friend's house. Somehow, after all that, you felt more energized than you did before. These are all stories that represent miracles happening each and every day, miracles happening all around us. The jar of oil lasting a whole famine is the same as the followers of Jesus standing up to Christian nationalism. It feels like there won't be enough. There won't be enough people to do it. There won't be enough energy among us. The Bible readings and our own stories remind us that God knows what God is doing when He sends those in need our way. There will be enough for us. There will be enough money. There will be enough food. There will be enough housing. There will be enough energy. It will not be easy, but there will be enough for everyone if we open our hearts, if we listen, if we share. This is the challenge and charge in the gospel reading today. The widow of this story has given all that she has. Now what will become of her? Remember, she never had much to begin with. Almost certainly, she has always done her part. Now comes the question, will her community, will the church step up and help her? It is up to them. It is up to us to decide. Will we ignore the needy one right in front of us? Like the scribes in their long robes, will we be too focused on ourselves that we don't even see the widow in our midst? Will we take the widow's gifts and give them nothing in return? Or are we going to care for our neighbor, even when it feels like so many around us are only interested in caring about themselves? Will we stand up to oppression? Will we fight injustice? As our vice president said this last week, this is not a time to throw up your hands. This is a time to roll up your sleeves. Jesus not only rolled up his sleeves, but he gave all he had. He gave his life. All that he had, and through it, he saved the world. God gives us everything that we have, our time, our talent, our treasure, our legacy, our varied lives. And sometimes what we have seems small in comparison to what is needed. Sometimes what we have seems small in the face of the world's sorrow. And yet, these little things, this little church, have been blessed by God. We have this life, this one life to give, this little faith, this little hope, this tiny congregation. They are enough. In fact, they are more than enough. We don't have to be Jesus. He already won the battle against sin, against death, against the devil. We just need to follow the example of the widow, to trust in God, to share, and to expect a miracle. Thanks be to God. Amen.